All right, so let me just I'll put up here. So thanks everyone. It's great to see all of these folks out here. Like you said, I'm the Sustainable Landscape with coordinator with Open Lands, and it's a great to get paid to do something that I absolutely love and have such a passion for. When I talk about native plants, a lot of times when we think about plants, we think of something that's pretty, which yes, these native plants are pretty, but it's more than just that these plants are pretty. It's what these plants do in our landscapes that make them so beautiful. It's kind of like you can be a real pretty person on the outside, but it's like what's on the inside that really counts, whether you have friends and whatnot. And that's the same thing with native plants. They don't just look nice, but they're just fabulous. And I'm going to delve into that a little bit tonight. And I do hope everybody can, if you don't already have that enthusiasm, I know so many of you do, which is great. I hope I can get that. So this is a picture of my yard. You can see I've got the, some of you have the conservation sign from when we're with Conserve Lake County, but this is the open land sign now that we have now that Conserve has merged. So for those of you that aren't too familiar with it, Open Lands is another nonprofit 501c3 organization. We have partnered with a lot of organizations, including yours, because we also partner with the Libertyville Open Space Township. And it's really to protect these natural areas and advocate for them in this greater Chicagoland area. So just to kind of go over what we're going to talk about, what I'm going to talk about is what is a native plant. I know that your word is used quite a bit, but what does that really mean? And why is it so important? Why am I like plant native plants so much? And then we're going to go over a little bit of landscaping criteria, kind of things to keep in mind when you're thinking about your yard. And then I'm really going to get into a selection of native trees and shrubs for beautiful landscaping. I will not get into all of the native trees and shrubs that are great in the landscape. And
I don't know where the sound is.
There's certainly more, but I will go over some. And then, like I said, I'll end up with some resources. So a native plant, that's a region's plants that evolved over the course of thousands of years. Those are the plants that are native to that region. These plants have developed specialized relationships with insects and other organisms, and they're adapted for the climate, soil, topography, rainfall, kind of stuff. Every region has its own unique native plants, and not every
where I'm supposed to go to find the sound.
Your property. So that's kind of important to keep in mind. If a plant is native. These two books are great resources. These books aren't for everybody. They're big, they're expensive, but they're really cool, especially if you're a plant geek. I find it's a very helpful website that I use all the time because it's so much quicker than looking them up, is if you go to plants, plants.usda.gov, G-O-V. That's a fabulous resource. You can type in the plant scientific name. You could also type it in by common name, but you'll have much better results if you can use that Latin name. And what happens is you'll get a lot of information, but a map of North America pops up. So for those of you that aren't in Illinois, you can zoom in on, whatever state you're in, you can zoom in to your county to see if that plant is native to your county. Again, because each area has its own unique native plants. Fabulous website. Again, that's plants.usda.gov. What's neat about where we live here, most of us are probably I'm in Lake County. That's kind of my focus area in the Chicago region. But we are in a very ecologically rich area. The Chicago area has over 1,600 native plants, and that's more than any of our national parks. There's just a lot of really cool plants that are here, and a lot of that is because of our very specialized location. We're kind of at the border of a lot of different systems. Anyway, so we talked about what a native plant, those are those plants that evolved in a certain region. And that's important when we're thinking about the services that those plants provide. I know this seems kind of silly, but I hear it wrong all the time. So we're going to go over the Earth's food chain. So we have the sun, right? Everyone knows like the sun, and the plants are able to use that sun and carbon dioxide through photosynthesis to make sugars for themselves. That's the only way that plants make their food. There's always one exception, but generally the green plants make their food through photosynthesis. That's the only way plants get food. When the commercials come on to, feed your lawn, when Scotts wants you to put a bunch of fertilizer on, you cannot feed the plants unless you are the sun. So that's something I think that we got to keep in mind. And then where this becomes really important is the next thing in the food chain is those organisms that eat the plants. And again, this is an evolutionary thing. And then we have those organisms that eat those plants and so on. So why that's important is because most insects can only develop and reproduce with the plants they share an evolutionary history. Those are those native plants. It's not 100%, but it's a very high percentage. I think an example that a lot of people are familiar with, insect plant relations are the monarch and the milkweed. So those monarchs have to have the milkweed to complete their life cycle. They need that to raise their young. And that's so true with so many insects. And Doug Ptolemy did a really cool, some cool studies. I don't know, for those of you that don't, Doug Ptolemy, he's an entomologist that's written some pretty neat books like Bringing Nature Home and Nature's Last Hope, kind of for the homeowner and using native plants. But he did some studies where he showed that in non-native landscape, the caterpillar population has decreased by 91%. And if you are a baby bird, that is devastating. Chickadees alone, and these are like a little small bird, they bring like almost like 400 or 500 caterpillars a day for one clutch. And those little baby birds, it takes about 14 days, I think, for them to fledge. So that's thousands of caterpillars just for one nest of chickadees. Probably comes as no surprise with the non-native landscape that we have over 430 species of North American birds at the risk of extinction. And that's 3 billion fewer breeding birds from 1970 from 2015. So it's not just the birds that need these insects that the plants feed. Got a lot of mammals, including these cute little fox. And what was kind of surprising that I learned was that even a hummingbird diet, which we think of as just sugar water feeders, it's 90 to 80% insects and a fair amount of spiders too. So again, pretty much east of the Mississippi, and certainly in our area, 80% of the land is privately owned. That's folks like us with our yards. That's where most of the property is. I know in Lake County, we've got a really strong forest preserve system, but it's not enough. Conservation must succeed on private land. So that's where we really want to kind of rethink about plants, not just as decorations. Because when that happens, we get ecological destruction, which has kind of happened. Well, it has happened. But if we can add function to that criteria, still have beautiful plants, still have beautiful landscaping, we can really hit that ecosystem restoration, and the birds will certainly thank you. So what should we want to raise the bar for our landscape. What should we think about what our landscape is doing? And it's a given that landscape is going to look fabulous. We want it to look great, but we also want it to provide those habitat corridors, those areas in between our wonderful forest preserves. We want our landscapes to clean and manage water. I'm sure most of us has some been affected by flooding and whatnot. Supporting pollinators, super important. And, you know, combating climate change. That's something you can do on your property. And for those of you that hadn't seen this diagram before, I think this really tells what some of those functions can bring to your landscape. You can see these columns on the far sides of the computer, they're in feet. And the horizontal line going across, that's sort of the soil line. So you see the green above, that's what we think of when we think of plants, the part that we see. But what's happening underground is super critical when we're talking about stormwater control and climate change, you know, combating those things. These roots, these deep roots act as sponges. They soak up the water, they filter the excess nutrients from the water. They're fabulous carbon sinks, and they really help enrich the soil more than any chemical fertilizers can do. As these roots grow and break down, that really adds that organic matter. And the soil's alive. What's happening underground, that's a whole nother like planet. And I could spend, you know, a year talking about, well, I couldn't, but you could go to college and spend a year learning about soil and longer. But what's I think really telling is if you look on the far left side in that little red circle, that's turf grass. That's what your lawn is doing for you. And the lawn may be important for, you know, a place for your dogs to run or your kids to play. But you really want to think about what that lawn is doing for you. And you know, as you look at the screen, keep that in mind when you look at your plants, when you look at your property, what's happening underground, because there's a lot of ecosystems functioning above ground, of course, above and below ground. Of course, there's a lot of benefits happening above ground too with the flowers, but I'm going to refer back to this slide. So here's an example of, you know, what seems to be a fairly nice property, but if we think about what's happening underground, at least in the front yard, it's really a desert. There's nothing. I mean, there are really a lot of missed opportunities. So we want to think about how we could, you know, make this better. You know, just planting a few trees that would give, that would help with the stormwater control. That would help with carbon sequestering. It would provide habitat. Here's another kind of very common example of what we find around here with housing. And there's not that there's anything wrong with this. This isn't hurting anything, but it's the absence of native plants. None of these plants are native. The amount of species that these plants could support is in single digits. And we need those numbers to be in triple digits. So here's kind of a common scene in a lot of neighborhoods, just a lot of lawn. It's kind of like the default. There are some trees here, and that's good, but there's always room for more. So we kind of want to think about, as these houses are connected, what it could be. And I'm going to go back to this great show, The Joy of Painting, Bob Ross. I don't know if any of you watched PBS back in the 70s, but he would always add, let's just add a happy little tree there, and he'd his paintbrush. It was kind of a cool show. I want to talk about the joy of planting. So here's what we could do with that neighborhood that didn't really have those trees as much as they could have, is make those habitat connections, really, you know, kind of transform it. And this doesn't necessarily happen overnight. This can be a process, but something to kind of strive for and really getting things going. Now, I will say, when I first bought my house 25 years ago, all a plant had to do was be free. But as I love this quote from Maya Angelou, I did then what I knew to do. Now that I know better, I do better. So I really upped the ante with my own landscape. So this is a picture I took. It was a phenomenal year this fall for color. And So let's just see. Getting things popping up on my screen because I'm posting. Okay, here we go. So here's a section of my property that I thought was perfectly fine. I took this photo. This has been redone in all native plants this fall. There was a lot of Norway maples and ash trees. Well, I knew the ash would all be dying from the emerald ash borer, and they did. So when that happened, and kind of as it was happening, I put in this black haw viburnum, musclewood, the catalpa just showed up. There's sugar maple, wild currants, hackberry, red oak, more musclewood, a white oak, dwarf honeysuckle, and some St. John's wort. So there's a lot of other things happening in there too, but just kind of focusing on the woody species. I've got a fairly big yard, but this really isn't that big of a space. This area supports triple digit species just of butterflies and moths alone. So here's another section of my yard in the back. This is the south side of my house. Up against it, I've replaced the yews with fragrant sumac. And then I put in all these native plants. Just think about that diagram again of all of those prairie plants and those roots getting a lot of ecosystem services. So there's people that are trying to get into the thing. Can you guys admit them? Is someone admitting them, or do I need to admit them? Here's another area of the property that was just a few trees, and this area, a lot of water comes through, and it puddles in the spring. So I planted accordingly. There's native plants to match any spot in your yard, and here you can see. This is, I kind of call this hummingbird alley because the hummingbirds just go crazy for the cardinal flower, and I think they like the structure of the trees and other things I have around. And then here's just another spot. I just love the coneflowers. A big fan of that. Happy with Culver's root and rattlesnake master, the swamp milkweed. This area I planted. You can kind of see the backs of this back screen. That's a bunch of different species of viburnum, spice bush. Let's see, what else do I have in there? Pagoda dogwood, and you can't really tell, it's just green. I got some oaks in here, but this is the lowest portion of my property. All of the water, when we have a rain event, it all flows through here. So just think, this is like a giant sponge that is used to just be lawn, but now it's this giant sponge and carbon sink. And then it's a bird feeder. It's habitat. There's pollinators. So what kind of native plants? Think about what should I plant? And here's a happy little bluebird in a pagoda dogwood. I'm really suggesting what we're going to focus on tonight are the framework of native trees and shrubs. The reasons for that is they really have the most ecological and economic benefits of all the different kinds of plant types. Trees are the least likely kind of plant to be removed by successive homeowners. There's some municipalities or villages that have tree removal ordinances, and also a lot of people are just, they have emotional ties to trees. They feel bad about cutting out a tree, whereas a lot of times some of these rain gardens or other types of gardens can be a hard sell to subsequent owners. Not to say you shouldn't use them, but for, just to start off with. Also, the landscape functions that your trees and shrubs, your woody plants provide, how they frame and screen views, add scale, shelter from the elements like rain, wind, dust, sounds. You know, trees are the longest lived plants. And I think especially as we've all been home so much, the physical and mental health benefits should not be discounted. They are last but not least on this, on what, you know, some of the what benefits of these trees provide. We cannot talk about trees without talking about the oaks and hickories. Oaks are the keystone species in Lake County, and that's what this map shows. And like, you know, Lake County is in the northeastern part of Illinois, right at that Wisconsin border with Lake Michigan there on the right. Oaks alone support over 500 species of butterflies and moths. I've listed a few of the common oaks in our area and a couple of the hickories. What this map shows is in the gray where the oaks were in the 1830s. And then in the dark green, 2010 shows what's left of them. You can see this area here at the very bottom. That's Riverwoods, and then we have Lincolnshire, Mattawa, and Libertyville. That's where my arrow is going. That's the Des Plaines River, just for those of you that aren't too familiar with the area. But that's the largest remnant population of oaks in the area. And the oaks that are left, unfortunately, they're all under the threat of buckthorn. We kind of talked about that before, how important it is to get that buckthorn out, because we do not have that next generation of oak trees. So adding a young oak or hickory tree, those are the most significant things you can really do. Most of these oaks will do pretty well. The black oaks are pretty much, you know, more in Zion and those sandy soils around in that area. And then the hill or the pins oak, that's really likes a little more acidic. So that can be tough for a lot of properties, but the bur oak, the swamp white oak, the chinkapin, if you have the right sun, those can be a good fit. So here on the left, this is my little baby oak that I planted about 5 years ago. It's a pretty little tree. It's going to do amazing. People talk about oaks growing slow. They're sometimes reluctant to plant them, and the same thing with hickories. And it's not that these trees are growing slow, but think about that diagram about the roots. They're really focusing their growth below ground. So you're getting a lot of plant below ground. You just don't really see it above ground. But it doesn't take, you know, too long to get to be some size. And this picture on the right, this is a great-great-granny oak tree. And I kind of think of it as the, any of you of the Lord of the Rings fans of Treebeard. This tree is alive even in the winter time. It's just, she's an amazing tree. So some other really important ecologically species are the chokecherry. This is a great plant for hosting a lot of caterpillars. That if you like birds, this is a tree to have. Sometimes when we're doing restoration, these species need to be controlled, but they really do well on a home landscape. I have one, and it just volunteered there, and I'm thrilled to have it to be there, and I can't wait for it to go. It's it needs a fair amount of sun, but it's salt tolerant, so that's good. Probably one of my favorite trees is the musclewood. I took this picture this fall. Guys, we just had, I can't remember fall color being as awesome as it was this year. Just looks like it's on fire. Anyway, as it gets older, it has this really cool smooth, that's why it has another common name as blue beech. It's got like smooth bark like a beech tree, but it has like muscly, like fluted bark. Really interesting. Now here I've got this plant. This is going on the edge of a tree line that I have in my yard. And I like that for its screening. I like it for the privacy. So I've let all the lower branches, it's got more of a shrub shape. When you see it growing in the woods, it looks, it's not as thick and lush. It's a little more open when it's growing in the shade. But here at the bottom, you can see these are the Samoas, a little dried, Samaras. The ironwood is another similar tree, and these smaller trees that I've been talking about, they're really fabulous for that structure, because you have our canopy trees like our oaks and our hickories, maples, and other type trees, but you want to get that other layer, especially when we're gardening, landscaping for wildlife. The birds really like that layering, just like a rainforest has layering. So, so should our landscaping. So these understory trees like the chokecherry, the musclewood, the ironwood, I'll talk about a few others, really important and often missing. So it's really nice to add if you already maybe have your big canopy trees. But another one that takes, a fair amount of shade. What's kind of neat about this tree too, these are the fruits, the Samaras, Samoas. I was thinking of Girl Scout cookies, but they're fairly shade tolerant, but the leaves stay on. So they keep the leaves throughout the winter. So again, if you're looking for that screening, especially if you have a lot of buckthorn and you're thinking about, you want to replace it, but you don't want the openness, this is a nice buckthorn replacement. So pagoda dogwood, another great understory tree, super fabulous for layering. I know I've read some literature where it talks about the passenger pigeons. They really love that horizontal branching, and they would just roost there in the thousands, so you couldn't even see the trees. That would have been a sight, but really nice for a shade garden. It's fairly shade tolerant, so really nice understory tree. So the yellow birch, I took this picture this winter. It's got this kind of neat little peeling bark. But what I like about this is when you go by and scratch a branch, it's got this really wonderful winter green scent, and it just get a little aromatherapy. It's kind of a fun thing, and you can do that any time of year. So even when I'm walking around my garden in the winter, I can still go by and give a little twig a scratch and have some fun. Witch hazel, another nice one for that kind of extending the garden through. I took this picture a couple of years ago after Thanksgiving, and you can see it's blooming. It's the latest blooming plant we have in our area. So that's pretty fun. I love anything that, those early and late bloomers are always important. Serviceberry, this is like a jewel in the spring to have. The white flower display is phenomenal. The berries, they're tasty to eat, but the birds will just grab them before you get a chance to. Again, fairly shade tolerant. It needs a little bit of sun. Can't grow in full shade, but a couple hours of sun and you've got it. The false indigo bush. I never had a spot for this plant until I had my lake house. And that was the first thing I planted. And what was so neat about this, here you see it, it blooms fairly early in the season, which is nice. But I planted this little shrub as a plug. It was only a couple inches tall. And by the fall, it was already a few feet tall. And it only took a year or two for it to get to be full size, 8 feet. And it's just a really neat, interesting plant. And I've mentioned some of these in the notes that, if you've got a problem area in your yard that floods, plant a shrub there. You don't have to worry about mowing it or trying to get anything to grow. Just pop in a shrub and you're done. And when I say flood tolerant, I mean it's flooded for about 30% of the season. So elderberry, this is a nice one too. These are fast growers. So if you're looking for, buckthorn replacements, it's nice because it grows, it quickly fills in. So here I took this picture on the left this spring, the white flowers, just real showy, kind of nice, pretty, and that it grows fast. I mean, it only takes like a year or so to get in there. But this picture I took later in the summer then, You can see I've got it planted next to a little white oak, and this is an area that I wanted privacy. It's kind of along the road, and I've got the white oak there. It can grow, take its time, but meanwhile, I've got this elderberry that's kind of filling in the hole in my landscape. Nine bark's another nice one for privacy, for screening. It grows fairly quickly. It will handle, you don't have to have good soil. You know, some of these plants like a little better soil. Nine bark is not one of them. Is it dry? Is it wet? That's okay. Nine bark will take it. It's probably one of the toughest, and it's pretty. I took this picture on the bottom this winter. It's kind of neat. The dried seed heads add contrast in the snow. And it's, again, I've got the road you can see in the background. It sort of buffers the road. So it's a great plant. Rosa blanda, that's a really another nice one. It'll just handle that tough, lousy soil, especially if you're in new construction, if you have a recently built house and maybe the soils have been beat up. Rosa blanda, no problem. It does have thorns, and I'm not a big thorn fan, but these red juicy rose hips are worth it. It really adds beautiful contrasting with the greens of the other plants. It has little pretty purple flowers. They're not as showy as some of the cultivated roses, but these rose hips make up for it. They're really neat. Hazelnut. So I took this picture on the left. Again, I took it this fall, just as it was starting to get some fall color. Gorgeous shape. Highly recommend it. It'll handle a fair amount of shade. It's going to do better and have better color when you have the sun. If it's growing in a lot of shade, you just won't get the vibrant colors. And then it has these great nuts. Hazelnuts are also called filberts, so some people might know them as filberts, but they're just it's a phenomenal tree. If I had more property, I would plant more hazelnuts. In fact, I think I'm going to find some space to add some more because they're really neat. Purple flowering raspberry, that's another one I want to add more to. So this, I took this picture this summer. This is at the east side of my house. So there used to be, of course, like every house built in the 70s. Well, I think from 1950 to 1980, it was yews, right? They put a bunch of yews around the house and they called it landscaped. So I replaced the yews with this purple flowering raspberry and the dwarf honeysuckle. And that's a really nice combination. These spiky plants in the background, that's some bottle brush grass. Again, that's a fairly shaded area, but it does get some direct sun in the morning. And what's neat about this is that the raspberries are delicious and there are no thorns. So that's a double, it's more than a double win, but really, it's just these pretty purple flowers with juicy raspberries and with no thorns that I can just kind of walk up into and have a little snack and, see all the pollinators that are on that. Okay, Black Haw viburnum. I have used this shrub extensively in my yard. This is from a friend of mine. For those who don't know, Sarah Rose, this is a photo that she shared. But they make excellent screening. They're one of the more shade tolerant viburnums. They got these real pretty white flowers in the spring. My neighbor's a beekeeper, and the one spring my black haws were just covered in honeybees. But all sorts of pollinators enjoy this. He gives me free honey because his bees use so much of my plants. But really, again, nice. The fall color, I just get this reddish, orangish, purple. It's got a nice, that's a pretty big size. These are sometimes referred to as trees because they can get pretty big. Just a great addition to the landscape. Oh, very good. Sumac, I've used this again to replace those yews because they don't get too tall. And as the sumacs go, some of you may be familiar with staghorn sumac or maybe the smooth sumac. Those are great, but probably not most home landscapes can handle those trees or those shrubs for the way that they spread. They can take a lot of space. But the fragrant sumac doesn't really sucker, I'll say, as violently, as aggressively. So it can make a nice landscape plant. And I've not had any problem with this in the probably 10 years I've had it growing. But it gets that nice fall color. It has these berries. And what's really key with this shrub too, and I've noticed that this winter, the tree sparrows, and other birds, they just love that kind of branching that this shrub provides. And I can just see them hopping around the branches. They just really like to hang out in this. It must be a secure place for them. But anything that's good for the birds, I like, especially when I only have to plant it once and then I'm done. The wild currant, this was a surprise there. I just planted it because it was shade tolerant at one time. This was a fairly shady area, and then the trees died. So now it's in a lot of sun, and it's doing great. In the full sun, it gets this real vibrant red color. It also has a very edible berry. It's not as tasty as that purple flowering raspberry. I think people must put them in jams or something with it. Don't usually get a whole lot because I think other animals are eating it, but this is a really nice, a nice species to have. Again, there's no thorns, so that's what's really nice. So many of these in the Ribes family, genus, they have, nasty thorns to protect them, but these don't. So it's pretty nice. Yeah, not too tall. If you've got a flood area, it's a great little plant to have. But if you have it growing in shade, you will not get this phenomenal fall color. And that's true with most species. They need some sun to really get those deep fall colors. Hey, St. John's wort. This has also become a favorite of mine. So many of these are favorites, but just powerhouse of flowers and the pollinators that come to it. Almost every flower's got a bee or a butterfly or some little creature taking advantage of it. Just really enjoy it. It doesn't take good soil. So again, if you're a new construction, this is great. It's salt tolerant, compact soil. And I took this lower picture this winter because after a snow, all those little empty seed heads, I don't think all of them were empty because I noticed some birds where the snow had gotten really deep, they were trying to get to those seed heads. I don't know what they were trying to get there. Maybe, I guess there were some seeds still in there, but it's just really pretty too. So when we kind of want to think about what's happening in the summer when it's blooming, but also what it might look like in the winter. And again, think about what's happening under the ground. That's always important. And then the last species I'm going to talk about is this snowberry. And I like this one for what this photo shows. I've got this growing with, it gets zero direct sun. It's very filtered, but these white berries are just really interesting, really neat to the landscape, especially in a shady garden. It's a neat characteristic that they have. So what's something I read about too is this is a species that's really preferred by the birds for the cover that it provides in the summer. So again, really nice, important for the birds. And they can be tricky when you have a real shady spot, dry shade, what do you plant? Snowberry is one of the options. It's not going to give you privacy like some of these other ones were, but it's really nice to add. And when you layer different shrub combinations together, that can really get you some of the effects that you're looking for. So if you're looking for some help, whether you want to have a property appointment for some suggestions, or you're looking to certify your yard, I'd be happy to come out. Again, here's my email address. If you have some questions, you want to directly contact me or to get information about the programs, openlands.org/beautiful. I do want to thank you and for Patty and for the host for inviting me to speak to you all tonight. I'm really pleased to be able to share my passion for native plants with you all. So if anybody has questions, now is the time to.
Thank you very much for coming on. There were a couple of questions, some comments people were going back and forth. So maybe we can find some of these questions. Let's see, they were mixed in with people's comments. Foundation plants. I have non-native alpine currants, which the rabbits destroyed in past few years. Great time to replace. So
yeah, so I shared a couple of the foundation plants. I do have rabbits. Hungry animals will eat most anything. So there are, sometimes you might have to either use a spray or put a cage around it. But I have not noticed any animals eating my my Ribes americana. That was the the native currant. I also don't seem to have anything have eaten my again, because we're thinking a foundation plant, you don't want it too tall. We're thinking of a certain size. The dwarf honeysuckle, that's Daravilla lanicera. That's a real nice one too. I've used that extensively as a foundation plant. So again, and they'll take full sun to shade. So just not really the currant. I think that will take wetter areas, but I wouldn't think you'd have water by your foundation. The Daravilla does real well with dry shade too.
question was, can snowberry work as a foundation plant?
Yes, but I like the other ones because they're a little more thicker. So it kind of depends what your foundation looks like. Because my house is kind of unusual. They tried to berm it. So I've got some weird, it doesn't really look nice. If your foundation looks good, then it works. But if you have like something unsightly that you want to try and hide, I would not recommend it because it's thinner. It's not as lush.
Okay. One of the questions about viburnums being ravaged by a leaf beetle. Any recommendations?
There are some I think the ones that are least likely. Oh boy, I'm gonna guess. If you email me that question, I will get back to you. There are some viburnums that are more susceptible. I know the black haw is not as susceptible. That's not to say that you won't get it, but it was kind of in the not affected too bad, but can be affected. I believe there's a few others and they're usually not the ones that are as native to this area. You really just got to watch those viburnums before that beetle gets in, is checking for their eggs, those egg sacs now, I believe.
Also, bird-friendly plants can be found on Audubon if you're looking for particular plants, and you can go on Great Lakes or National Audubon and it will actually, you put in your area, it will do suggestions for that also, besides what Mary's told you. And there is on our site, I believe, under /native plants, if you go to www.audubon.org/native-plants, that will give you some for your area. So we have I counted 23 states on here, Mary, so some of these people are out of this area.
Well, yeah, and that's where, you can check with your local extension office. They'll have something, and I think there's like the National Wildlife Foundation. They've got a website where you can put in your zip code. if you just Google native plants, that can be helpful, but you want to make sure you're getting like a .org or an edu
Right.
type link. And I really selected the shrubs that I had for tonight's presentation from what I have growing in my yard. And what really kind of gives you like the most bang for your buck as far as ecologically speaking, with the amount of, species that they supported. So that was kind of how I picked these as, kind of the top producers. And bottle brush grass is a native grass, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, we put bottle brush in for restoration work to do for cover crop too. And
Yeah, it's a favorite of mine. It's great for, you think about when you think about landscaping, because you want to get not just do this for the for the birds, you want it to look good, but that motion that the bottle brush grass does, I have it growing like in a mass. It's better massed. It's I just think it's stunning. It's really a cool effect when those seed heads move in the wind. I love it.
Right. I'm looking to see if there's any other questions. Not sure anybody's popped in a new one. Oh, where can I? Okay, there was some questions about getting seeds. Somebody would like to find milkweed plants. We do have a number of places around here, but Lake County Forest Preserve, I think, will not be doing their native plant sale, but somebody put up that down in Barrington, they will be doing one. And if you, there's some sites that tell, we will probably have some more sites up on our website soon. We'll tell you where to get native plants. But Prairie Nursery up in Wisconsin is always good for plants and seeds. Actually, they run some specials around now, and they'll ship them to you, and they're ready to go in. We put a number of plants like that over at Thomas Jefferson Middle School and at the Adler House in Libertyville, and they're doing great. So
Yeah, those are great nurseries. The openlands.org/beautiful. If you go through that site, we talk about, where to get some plants. The Forest Preserve is having a native plant sale, but it's not like how they usually have it. And Openlands is doing the same thing that the Forest Preserve is doing. We'll have a portal that goes to the Possibility Place nursery that's in Moni, Illinois. And you can order plants to be shipped. So, but like you said, Prairie Nursery is great. I get a lot of plants from Taylor Creek. IZEL is another website you can go to. IZ as in zebra, EL. They have different places depending on where you live, because they do have some other states, I think Tennessee and Texas maybe, where they have native plants that you order directly. It's kind of a clearinghouse between the grower and the consumer.
you have suggestions for around here or close, in particularly shrubs? A number of questions about shrubs.
The thing is for where to buy the shrubs.
I suspect that's.
Yeah. So Midwest Ground Covers, they have a native shrub line. They don't sell so much retail, but some of the small independent nurseries order from them. So like a place like Pasquazi's or Hawthorne Gardens, you might be able to talk to them and they could order it from there. But really Possibility Place, I have found that they have the largest shrub selection of any of the areas around here. Okay. So they'll ship to you in 1 gallon size. You can have stuff shipped, or you can go, you have to call and make an appointment. They're not like, again, they're not like the Pasquazi's where you just show up. They're not set up as a retail place, but you can call and make an appointment to go there. You go to their website too. We recommend, if you're looking for certain characteristics in a plant, you can use their native plant finder. And there's a lot of different selections based on your soil type, your light, what kind of features you're looking for. And then that will spit out different suggestions for you, even if you don't buy from them. It's a good tool to use.
Okay, yeah. So I wonder if we have any further questions here, but they can go ask you questions, go to your email, and also get a survey of their property through you, correct?
Yep. Yeah, we could do a property. So that there is a $50 fee for the property appointments. If you live in Libertyville, Ottawa, Lincolnshire, or Riverwoods, there is no fee because part of the Oak Ecosystem Recovery Plan, through this Chicago Region Tree Initiative, we have some funding to help cover the cost for those areas. But $50. If you need a little help or guidance, it can be money well spent, and you get to hang out with me for an hour. And the appointments are about an hour.
Good. All right. Well, thank you so much. And we have
Sure,
to
it
send,
was again, and I appreciate being able to talk to you all. And thanks again for having me out. I hope to see some more of you.
yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And everybody have a good week. You have some good weather again. You can get out birding and pretty soon planting. And I guess it would be about the last coming up here if you want to throw some of those seeds that you've been keeping cold all winter. If you want to put them down on the snow, now's a good time for those native seeds also. So before it all melts away, it's a good time to put them on. And we hope to see you again, Mary, on here.
I love to share. I give me a platform. I can talk about, you want to talk about grasses? You want to talk about flowers? I can talk.
All right.
All right. Take care.
Yep. Thank
Bye-bye.
you. And we'll end now. And we hope to see you next month, everybody, at our next Audubon meeting and at a bird walk maybe, and at some event. So, and hope everybody's staying safe and need the shot and getting the shots.